Hey everyone, today I'm playing a training game against one of my students. Now my student's name is Chris and he's recently crossed over 1400, which is awesome, and he's a player with a very good understanding of chess in general, but he does have some trouble with performing under time pressure, and he also wants to learn a new opening with white. So that's what we're doing. We're teaching him the Colle system. Now the Colle system is an opening which is very good for those who don't want to study a whole lot of opening theory. You can play the first few moves almost without thinking. Now I say almost without thinking because it is true that there can be some things that black can do to disrupt things. Now Chris here has played one of the first moves of the Colle system setup. The plan is going to be knight to f3, bishop to d3, which he's already done, and then there's going to be knight bd2, castle kingside, and white is going to aim for the e4 pawn break. So I'm going to try playing in a manner that one of his opponents recently played and where he didn't know what to do. So he's done the right thing here so far. After c5, which challenges the pawn on d4, c3 reinforces this pawn. So I'm going to add some extra pressure with knight to c6, and I expect that what Chris is going to do here is play knight to f3. This is going to allow him to castle kingside. Yeah, so here it comes. Now the move that his opponent played, which gave him some trouble, is bishop to g4. This gets the light squared bishop out before playing e6. In one of his games, he had played h3, and then after bishop to h5, g4, which really weakened his kingside. So my advice to him was to play the move that he's just played, which is knight bd2. And this means that he can not worry about this threat too much. Eventually he can move his queen out of danger and just be okay. The problem with playing h3 and g4 is that it weakens the king side, so we don't really want to do that. Now I play e6. The idea of this is to develop my own dark squared bishop and get castled myself. I think white's position here is absolutely fine, and for that matter, so is black's position. Both sides are going to castle, and you're going to get to play a game of chess without a whole lot of early complications in the opening. It's a bit similar to the London system in many ways, actually. Like the London system sees white develop their bishop outside the pawn chain first. But by keeping this bishop on its starting square, it can spring to life later. So we're going to see that after white plays the move e4. I have to say as well, the way that I am playing here is not the way that I usually play with the black pieces, so I've got to be a bit careful here. I mean, you don't want to take anything lightly, right? Chris is a good player, as I've mentioned, so I'm pretty sure he's going to go for the e4 pawn break here, and then we're going to see how the game will continue. The benefit of the way that I've played here, though, is that I've managed to get my light squared bishop out before playing e6. Now there is a way to punish that, which I'll go over at the end, but Chris hasn't found that idea, so this is basically an improved version for black. Black has full equality here. Now by playing the move queen to c2, I believe that Chris might have missed something here. The thing that I think he might have missed is that I can capture here on d4. Now if he takes back with this pawn, then I'll have knight to b4. And if you can trade off this knight for this light squared bishop, then that's very good for black. If he takes back with the e-pawn, which is also possible, then he hasn't got his main middle game pawn break. He's been trying to play e4, but if you capture with the e-pawn, then that's no longer going to be possible. So I'm interested to see what he does here. I think taking this way is probably better, but it does mean that you can't play in the usual Colle system manner. One thing you can notice here though is that because he played knight bd2, he was able to move this queen away without the consequence of being able to capture here, right? Like imagine this knight was back here, then in this position I could capture the knight on f3 and ruin white's pawn structure around the king. Okay, so he's gone for the correct plan here. So very good so far by Chris, I have to say. I have to be a bit concerned about this diagonal. I've got the knight that's covering it for the time being, but now I need a plan. So one thing that you can do when you're not quite sure what to do is to just increase the pressure. I'm going to put this rook on the c file. So this points at the white queen on a semi-open file and might renew the threat of playing knight to b4. They wouldn't be able to capture because of this pin. But great play from Chris so far. One thing that I think he might be wondering is what to do with this knight. I mean, he has to solve the problem of this knight b4 idea first, but this knight now doesn't have a good job to do where it is. It's actually blocking the development of the dark squared bishop. So one idea that you can do with this knight is bring it around via f1. Might look a little bit strange to go backwards with the knight like that, but it gets it to a better square eventually. I think this is the sort of move which is a bit harder to see when you're just getting started in chess. You're taught to develop your pieces, right? You want to go forward, but sometimes to improve a piece you've got to go backwards first. And this maneuver, knight to f1, coming eventually to g3 or to e3, is a maneuver worth bearing in mind. Because in the original Collet system position where white gets to play e4, this knight supports that. While Chris is thinking, I might just go back a few moves. So in a position like this, if the pawn is advanced to e4, then this knight plays the role of supporting that pawn, right? So pawn here, and then if I capture, then that knight will be ready to capture back. Now Chris is taking his time here, which is a good thing. It was one of my instructions to him actually before we started our game today. Because when you're facing a much higher rated opponent, you'd much rather get into trouble on the clock than to make a mistake early, right? But he's going to get the most out of this experience by getting as far into the game as he can, playing as strongly as he can. If the clock ends up going in my favour, then that's okay. But he's taking his time, good to see. This position actually looks a bit like an improved version of the French defence to me. Like in the French defence, black often has this pawn on e6, and the light squared bishop is back here, which is making it hard to get that bishop into the game. With the bishop already developed, then yeah, it's just a bit better for black here. I've certainly got no advantage here, but I think Chris is searching for a plan as well. Okay, so he's come up with a pretty interesting idea actually. He's come up with bringing the knight into e5, which is a good square for that knight. So now if I were to take that knight, let's say with the knight on c6, then there'd be a fork here, right? So I can't allow that. And in the meantime, there's also the threat against this light squared bishop. So I'm looking at the candidate moves here. Knight takes e5 fails because of pawn takes e5, forking the bishop and the knight. Bishop takes e5 is also a bit uncomfortable because after the pawn recaptures, then this knight is attacked and kind of has to move. I could also retreat the bishop. Something like bishop to f5 might make sense, but again, let's calculate it. If I play that, then bishop takes f5 and pawn takes, and yeah, nothing good there because the queen would recapture and white would win a pawn. But I think the threat that I'm going to go for here is the one that I was looking at before. thing is I can capture this pawn, and after white captures back, well, then I could take the queen. So the moral is that white can't capture back. Another way of playing this is with knight to b4. Now that would fork the queen and the bishop. But then the queen moves away, and I get the bishop, it's true, but I haven't won material in that line. So I'm looking at these two as my main candidate moves. Knight takes d4, and is there anything there for white? Well, because the knight is also attacking the queen, he has to respond to that, right? And there's no good checks. So the alternative of knight to b4 is going to make sure that the slight squared bishop gets off the board, but I like the ability to win material better. So this is what I'm going to do. The problem is that by moving this knight away from f3, he's left that pawn on d4 undefended. So always be careful, because there could be a check, there could be an intermezzo, but here I'm pretty confident that there's not. Taking on d4 attacks the white queen, and there's no good check or good way for white to reply to that. So that's what Chris has missed. You can't take this knight because of the pin. Now, how should white respond here? So white has missed something, and when that happens, you need to try and recover. It's actually quite tough for white to recover here now, though, because this queen doesn't have a great deal of squares. It could go to b1, or it could go to a4. And I can always consider taking this knight in some cases. I've also got this idea of playing the knight over to e2, which doesn't work immediately, by the way, because of the threat of bishop takes, and rook takes. But losing a pawn is not a great thing to happen, and I think Chris could have avoided this by noticing what I had done the move before, right? Rook to c8. So what does that do? Well, it lines up the rook against the white queen. Now I think that Chris has shown the characteristics in this game which I mentioned at the start. He's got a good strategic understanding. He got to this position, which is absolutely fine for white, but he did miss a tactic here. So that's what we're going to work on. When you're training chess, you always want to work on the thing that is weakest in your game. So there's so many things that you can work on. There's basically an unlimited number of things, actually. You can train endgames, you can solve puzzles, you can study openings. But you can't do everything all at once. Okay, so queen to a4 has been played. Now, this is a tricky move because the queen is x-raying a couple of pieces here. I have to be careful, actually. The queen is threatening to take the knight, and also the pawn is threatening to take the knight. And if I move the knight away, for instance, where can it go? Let's say to c6, well then there'd be too much pressure against this bishop. You'd have knight to c6, knight takes g4, knight takes g4, and then queen takes. So actually what I need to do here is I need to trade off this strong knight. It's better to do this now because, unlike in the other line, back here, right? Yeah, after here, because I've eliminated this pawn, white is not going to be able to take back with a pawn. So let's play this way. I have given up the bishop pair, but it's necessary in order to save the piece. So there's a couple of choices that Chris could go for here. He could play rook takes e5. That's what I consider to be most likely. Or he could actually respond to the capture on e5 with a capture on d4. That's possible too. So let's see what he goes for. I haven't actually worked out which one of these is better. He can't, of course, take the knight with the queen because the bishop guards it. But I think taking with the pawn is certainly one way to play. and taking with the rook is another way to play. Either way, he has to take back something, otherwise he's just down a piece. After rook takes e5, then I'm actually gaining some initiative by bringing the knight back. So rook takes e5, followed by knight to c6, attacks the rook if it's on that square. If he takes with the pawn, well, then I can just move back, and maybe I'd even move all the way back here and bring my queen into d6 with an attack. Okay, so he's gone for that. He's gone for that actually, which I think is totally reasonable and also quite interesting. So now I've actually been able to keep the pair of bishops. And if we look, I've got a couple of threats here. I've got a threat against the bishop a couple of ways, so I need to move that bishop out of the way. That much is clear. And I've also got a threat against this pawn. Queen takes a7 could be possible. And often it's not a good idea for that pawn to be captured. It's just a bit dangerous to bring the queen down here, but I think in this case actually it would be all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this threatened bishop out of danger while also defending this pawn. I'm a pawn up, so I just need to play solidly from here and I'll have extra material. So it's all about being careful when you're ahead material. So I'm going to bring it back like so. One of my next ideas could be queen to d6 and lining up against the h2 pawn. The benefit of having this bishop on g4 is that if I get this idea in, right, like let's say that I get queen to d6 and then knight to f3 to stop that, well then I can always take on f3 with this bishop. So the move queen to d6 I think is going to provoke a weakening move around the white king. So I think, yeah, queen to d6 I think is what's coming here, and if I were white that's what I'd be expecting. So I'd be thinking, well, what can I do to fight against that? I mean, playing knight to f3 is probably going to be met by bishop takes f3. So an alternative could be knight to f1. That at least would allow the dark squared bishop to get into the game. The problem that white's got here, apart from being down a pawn, is that his development is rather tangled up. This is because he didn't get to play the e4 move. So this knight is blocking this bishop. So to solve that, this knight really has to move. That's the way that I'd be thinking. I think knight to f1 is definitely possible. It might be what I would play, just to finish development. What else? Maybe he could try attacking this bishop, but again, that would be a weakening pawn move. And in that case, I could perhaps just go back and bring the bishop around here. So in general, I'd be quite happy with a trade of light squared bishops. Like, let's just look at one line. h3, bishop h5, g4. Well, it looks risky, but let's just say, and then bishop to g6. I'd be okay with this trade. Like if we had bishop takes on g6, and then I take back with the pawn. Hopefully you can follow all those arrows. Let's just go for it one more time. Let's say h3, bishop h5, g4, bishop g6. Captures, and I take back. This trade of the two light squared bishops, I think, favors black. Again, let's look at that rule of thumb. Two pawns on light squares, that means that the light squared bishop is the weaker of the two, because its mobility is a bit restricted. My strong bishop is the bishop which is on the opposite colour of the two central pawns, the dark squared bishop. So, and we can see the rule in reverse as well, right? White has got a central pawn on d4 on a dark square, and that makes the light squared bishop more powerful. Also, this light squared bishop points at h7. So in some cases, if this knight moves away, there can be the Greek gift sacrifice on h7. Okay, so he goes for h3. I guess what he's trying to provoke here is bishop to f5, And then we get the trade of the light squared bishops, but that is a bit ruinous to my pawn structure. Another thing that I can consider here is to play queen to d6, so answering this threat with a bigger threat of my own. Here though, I'd have to be a bit careful because it's always possible that white would take on the challenge, right? So let's say queen to d6, what if the pawn takes the bishop? Well, you've got queen to h2 check, king to f1, and maybe the king's actually safe there. You could give one more check, I guess, and then king to e2, and you could take this pawn. I mean, it looks dangerous for white, but concretely, is it winning? I'm not so sure. I think I can still play this queen to d6 move later, but I don't need to be so super aggressive with it right now. So I'm just going to drop back with the idea that I had before to potentially just trade off the light squared bishops, or if white doesn't do anything that prevents it, then maybe queen to d6 can be an idea. Okay, so we've got rook to e3. I think that Chris is being a bit over-optimistic here. He still needs to finish his development. So he's left this knight and this bishop and this rook pretty tied up. These two pieces are still on their starting squares, and this knight is getting in the way of everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and create this threat, which I feel like white will want to respond to. Now it's a bit different because the light squared bishop is cutting off the e2 square. So let's say that it was my move again. I could play queen to h2 check, king here, and then queen to h1. It would actually be checkmate because there'd be no king to e2. That light squared bishop would be controlling that square. I think rook to g3 is quite possible here, and maybe even likely. Okay, or blocking this way. So again, we've got another weakening pawn move. And as I've shared in some of my other videos, this is often the way to start an attack. Like when you can provoke these pawns forward, it makes the structure around the enemy king more vulnerable. But how to take advantage of this in this exact position? Well, what I really need to do is add an extra attacker to g3 to get this capture to happen. Like maybe I can look to play knight to h5 with an idea of sacrificing. This is what I'll go for. As I mentioned, I'm quite okay with this trade. One follow-up idea is to play knight to h5. So by bringing the bishop back, I'm actually freeing the h5 square for the knight. I also might be tempted now to take back with this f-pawn, which is a bit anti-positional, because usually you want to capture towards the center, which would mean h takes g6. But here it would actually open up the rook, which I quite like the look of. When you're in the final stages of an attack, it can be worth looking at ideas that you wouldn't consider normally. So by taking with the f-pawn, I'm actually opening up this rook, and white's king is looking quite vulnerable now. I have to be worried about this pawn, it's true. That's a backward pawn, but I think it's piece play that I want to go for here. This rook is open, and now then. He's finally developed his knight, which is what he needed to do, but the thing about moving this knight away from d2 is that now I can hop in to the e4 square. So obviously the knight is better on e4 than it is on h5, because from h5 it would be attacking g3, but from e4 it's more centralized, so it has the idea of potentially capturing on g3 or capturing on f2. I'd like you to notice that I'm not calculating a great deal here. I'm simply playing moves which follow good fundamentals, like bringing a knight towards the center, and I'm still not sure actually, as I'm talking to you, whether I'm going to sacrifice on f2 or on g3, or if I'm going to sacrifice at all. Another effect of bringing this knight over to f3 is that it blocks the rook's defense of g3. So I think a sacrifice is definitely in the air here, and if I were Chris, I'd be very concerned about this pawn, although it isn't easy to see what he can do. There's also the possibility of capturing this knight in some cases. We're getting to see the benefit of opening up the f-file there. This rook can now participate in the attack. So, given that I've got some time, let's do a quick calculation. Let's say it's my move again. What if I capture on g3? Well, white really has to take back, and then I take with the queen, and the thing is that the king can't add an extra defender to the knight. So here's what I'm picturing. Knight takes g3, pawn takes, and then queen takes g3 check. The king's going to have to move somewhere, maybe to h1. Well, in that case, I can not only win the knight, but I can probably get checkmate, right? Because then I can actually give up the rook for the knight and checkmate on h2. Okay, so Chris has brought his queen back. I think that's as good an idea as any. But let's see if that idea still works. Let's take a look. Knight takes g3, pawn takes g3, queen takes g3 check. We've got these three squares covered, so there's a choice between either king to h1 or king to f1. So if with the queen on g3, it's king to h1, do I have rook takes f3? Well, yes, I do, because however white would capture back, I would be able to follow up with queen to h2 checkmate. If after this, the white king goes to f1, then it could be a bit different. Maybe it doesn't quite work, at least not yet. It's very tempting though, I have to say. Queen takes h3 is also possible, so at the bare minimum I'm gaining 3 pawns for the sacrificed piece. I'm going to go for this. I'm going to go for this, and I think it's essential that after the moves that we're going to see, so Chris actually doesn't take the knight. Okay, well, at least that's showing a sense of danger, which is good. But now I have just been able to keep the extra material. And he played it very quickly as well. Like he obviously saw that this was an idea that was brewing. Now it's important to stay concentrated, don't relax, and to keep playing active moves. So that's an attack on the rook, and I'm 2 pawns up now, but I have to be a bit concerned about any tricks. I mean, this knight, you always want to be wary, don't you? It could come into some dangerous square with a fork. I have to worry about this pawn as well, so even though I'm working out how to win the game, I'm also very cognizant of how not to lose the game. So where's he going to move the rook to? Well, he can't move it to g3 because that would have the same problem. He could move it back, perhaps. And what would I do there to keep increasing the pressure? So my only real problem is this knight that's on e5. I'd like to get that one to move. So if rook back, I might look to bring the knight around here in order to attempt to get that one traded off. Okay, so he's gone with creating a threat of his own, which makes a lot of sense. So the threat is now rook takes b7. Just prophylaxis. Let's just prevent any lingering threats. There's no need to be fancy here. Let's just keep hold of every pawn. Okay, though, so now Chris has found a nice threat. He's brought his bishop out, and that comes with a threat against the queen. Now I want to be aware of every threat, so I'm going to move the queen away from danger before any tricks can come into the position. So let's do that with queen to d8. And in such positions where the opponent is low on time, you want to keep playing the best moves. You don't want to play against your opponent's clock. I have a very good position on the board here, so there's no need to do things which try to win on time. There's just simply no need. So now Chris is bringing his queen in, which again is a decent plan. But the problem is that I can take this pawn and then the knight defends the pawn. In such a critical position, though, I want to be sure, because the last thing I'd want to do would be to throw the game away after establishing a winning position. So knight takes d4. Let's say bishop to g5. That would attack the queen and then attack the knight with the queen. That might actually be the refutation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just keep this pawn under control. He might play bishop there, or maybe not. Taking this is very tempting. Let's go for it. My main problem is this pawn, and I knew that as I went into the line. But this is very tough now. He's down 3 pawns, but he has managed to get something of an attack going. So I'm going to give him a lot of credit for that. Just going to take this one to simplify. And bring the knight back. That seems the simplest. So now at 3 pawns up, the plan is definitely to trade. This is a... Haha, is that a good move? I didn't see that one coming. I didn't see that one coming, but I think I'm still all right. Or am I? Oh, he's actually winning the exchange here. Good on him. That's a great move, actually. That is a nice little tactic which he's found there. So now I'm really forced into playing this one. And he's going to capture, 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 capture. And capture. Still got a game on my hands here. But that was not the right way forward. That was not the right way forward. Yeah. Unfortunately, Chris just didn't have enough time there to figure everything out. So now I think I'm all right. I'm going to just look to consolidate here. Keep everything under control. That move attacks the rook. And it also means that I can look to trade even more material by moving this knight out of the way. So the move knight to h4 is going to come with a threat of coming in here. That's the threat. That's another threat. So I've got good coordination here. And with not a lot of time on the clock, it seems tough for white to hold on. But again, I think Chris has actually done a fabulous job of generating counterplay here. So really well done. Now he has left the rook undefended, unfortunately. So I can play knight here and then take the rook. So we took with the queen. So, of course, I just take back, right? Yeah. One last check. I think there's no problem there. And what's coming is taking. Trading off would also be fine, but unfortunately that just loses the rook. Yeah. So, unfortunately, yeah, we did get to the situation where Chris didn't have enough time to really finish the game in the way that he would have liked to. But I think he did a great job of generating complications there. When I review this game with him, I think he can be pretty proud of his efforts. I mean, obviously he did lose a pawn early in the game, and that led me to gaining a advantage. But yeah, after that, he brought his pieces towards the king, and you can see that even against 2100 rated opponents, it can get tricky, particularly when the clock gets low. So now it's just a matter of cleaning up. Respect the fact that he's not resigning, but this is going to be over in just a couple more moves. Okay, so that's the end of the game. Okay, so I'd like to review the game now, and I'm going to do this from White's point of view because I want to show Chris the improvements in the Colle system over the way that he played it. So the first point of feedback is that the move order that he went for is a bit unusual, with e3 on move 2 and then bishop to d3. This knight is left on its starting square for longer than it should be. So what I'd suggest instead is that you develop the knight on move 2. This way there's extra protection over the e5 square. And let's say that black plays the same way in the game that I did. Well, with c5, yes, you reinforce the center with c3, but bishop to g4 now can be punished by capturing on c5. It might look as though black is going to be able to take over the center with e5 with the threat of taking here, but actually white can support this. You need to calculate it, and every position is slightly different. But you might be worried about the threat of e4, but concretely white is okay after h3, bishop to h5, or if you take the knight then you take the bishop, and white is still absolutely fine here. But if the bishop goes back, then you hit it again. It goes to g6, and now the knight's got a choice of either e5 or d4. So this pushing of pawns in front of the king's side is not as dangerous here because we've got a closed center. The white king is probably completely safe on e1. It might not need to castle at all. But okay, let's go back to the game, because I think the way that Chris played was still more than enough to get an okay position out of the opening. Maybe black is a smidgen better, but it's not much. So all these moves were sensible, developing, going for the e4 pawn break. But yeah, here I was able to prevent that by the capture on d4. Always have to watch out for that one. And then I was able to gain a big advantage after Chris missed the threat of capturing on d4. Whenever you see the rook lined up against your own queen, you want to be wary of that. Maybe you even want to just move it out of the way straight away as a prophylactic move. But yeah, after I took this, then I'm up a pawn, which I was able to keep hold of. But, you know, Chris actually did a pretty good job of generating counterplay later on. I was able to get an attack going, and yeah, there was some pretty scary stuff coming here for white, and this sacrifice was actually correct. Chris chose not to take it and instead went for this counterplay, and you know what? I actually got to a position where I missed something. So it goes to show, right, if you keep the game going and you pull your opponent into a time scramble, then even stronger, higher rated opponents can go wrong. Yeah, this was a good move. I mean, he's creating threats here. He's playing actively, dynamically. And I was, on the other hand, going a bit passive. I was trying to find a way to make the game simple, but I wasn't able to do it. Yeah, this capture was fine, but then I missed this move, this very good move that he found, knight to c6. Now the computer is saying here that you play queen to f6 and black is still better, but it is a bit hard to believe because now it seems to simply lose a piece, but the all-seeing computer goes with h5, queen to d1, and knight to h4, and now there's too many threats on the squares around the white king. Very hard for me to find all of that, and I didn't. You know, I found a move which would have given up the exchange had Chris played knight takes b8. So after this, and this, then actually white is winning. White is winning after rook takes e6. Yeah, so really well done to Chris for finding that counterplay, but he was in a situation with very little time on the clock, and instead he chose to capture on e6, after which I was able to neutralize most of the most scary threats and go on to win the game. If you enjoyed this video, click here next to see me review a game against a 2000 rated opponent. You'll see the types of mistakes that players at that level make and exactly how to punish them.